Yeah, let's get into it. Today, I'm gonna talk to you guys about how to improve at art, or at least my idea and my experience with getting better at art. So, I suppose some context. I started drawing as early as I had memories. I was maybe like 3 or something. I can remember. I have very, very early memories of just doodling with crayons and trying to make dinosaurs and stuff, as I'm sure a lot of artists do. You know, you start screwing around with pencils and crayons, and you kind of start that whole journey, right? Um, I was pretty casual doodler sketcher until I was maybe 16 or so. Like I wasn't really that good. I could draw a decent person, but nothing impressive, right? And then oh wait, 1 second. Hold on. I forgot to do the I forgot to turn on the Discord window. We can't see the chat. There we go. Cool. Yeah. So anyways, now that we have the chat back on. And then around 16, I started getting into the idea of world building, which I'm sure I know a lot of you guys like to do. I did the same thing. You just start, you read Lord of the Rings and you're like, wow, I want to make one of those. And you start doing all your stuff and drawing maps. And I got really, really into, I got a lot of character work in because, I had to draw like all my characters, all my OCs and stuff like that. I had my phase 2, level the sketchbooks around. And that kind of went on for a while. I didn't get super serious, right? There's when you're in that kind of like sort of exploration mode, there's not really much of a focus on getting better, so to speak, and you just kind of draw and you feel like it, which isn't the worst. And I didn't really see any like serious improvement in my ability. There was just from general repetition of just drawing lots of characters, but I didn't get super into the idea of improving until a few years later when, I don't know, it just kind of hit me that I should get better. Oh, it's because, I should remember this. I fell into the world of getting paid for my art, which was bizarre. And then it became, since I was making money from it, a little bit, not a lot, but I was making money from it, I decided I had to get way better at art. And then from there, that's really one of the best ways you can do it, honestly, is to find a way to get paid for it. Because then you're like, well, now I want to get way better at it. There's nothing motivates you like money, right? And then from there, money motivated me to really push myself as to how to get better. Now, in the process of getting better, I want to pull up this little roadmap right here that I made for an article we can link to from this video. It's going to be on the website, Discord, somewhere. This is the general process for how you should learn your fundamentals. And why I'm starting here is because each one of these things builds off the prior skill. And one of the things that trips up a lot of people when it comes to improving at art is they are focusing on the wrong part of this roadmap. And if you don't have the supporting information, it's like you're just trying to learn something above your pay grade, right? That's usually what I see, and something that definitely caught me, right? Like you might be, because you want to just draw your characters and you want to color them, you're like over in this area when you haven't figured out this area. And so you're just trying to do something outside of your ability. And so what happens is you get frustrated because like you're trying to do a more advanced technique, but you don't have the foundation. And so you keep hitting these roadblocks and these problems and you can't make the thing you want to make. And it's just going to piss you off. You're going to lose motivation, and then you're just not going to work at it. And so usually, in my experience, the way you really improve at drawing is you have to keep looking for these kind of small wins. Where like, oh, I made that thing and that looks good. And it kind of motivates you to keep hunting for the next little win, right? You want to chain all these little wins where you're like, I'm proud of this thing that I made. I did something new and skillful. Let's do that again, right? You just got to look, you hunt for these little dopamine hits, in my experience. Because one of the problems with the internet is it's flooded on Instagram with people that are very, very advanced artists who have put in all of this time and drawn probably literally thousands of characters, and you don't see that gap, right? You don't see all the time they put in. You just see like this really excellent drawing of your favorite One Piece character, and then you sit there and you haven't put in that much time. Honestly, you haven't put in a lot of work, and you're like, well, why doesn't mine look like that? Well, because you haven't put in 5 years of continuous study drawing thousands of characters and actively studying light and color. That's the reason why. So then how do you get between those two is you have to find a way to just pull yourself along, right? And one thing I want to say on the side is, being like, just because someone else is like a quote unquote master artist doesn't mean it's necessarily for you, right? Because it might not actually interest you. You might be more in love with the idea of it than actually attaining it, right? Because there's a bit of a difference. Just because you like to, you sit there and go like, it'd be really cool to be a really good artist, right? But if you don't have that motivation, like intrinsically, you might not really want it that badly. You might just kind of like the idea of it rather than the actual state of being that tier of artist, right? Not to discourage anybody, but if you feel you're like fighting for that motivation and that hunger's not there, like forcing it's not going to make it just happen. You know what I mean? Like if you want it, you're going to go for it. To get there, I would again suggest small wins. So going over this roadmap, right? I'm going to walk through it, show how it all kind of chains into itself, and then I'll talk about how you can look at things that you want to draw and maybe try and use them to learn at your own skill level. So, first one here is movement, grips, tools, posture. I'm not going to get too in-depth on this because I have a little article you can read on this, which I'll link to. But this one is really important from my perspective as someone who's been doing art for my entire life and been doing it professionally for about a decade now. If you don't nail your movement, your grips, your tools, and your posture, and you decide you want to be an artist long-term, you're going to destroy some of your joints. Because art by itself is not very ergonomic. Like it's kind of unnatural. You're sitting in a little fixed position, your veins get all cramped, you're looking down at a paper or a screen, and you're just twisting your one little wrist, which is kind of a sensitive joint, to make all these shapes. And if you're going to do any kind of long-term time input, there's a really good chance of getting long-term injuries. Like I have a crick in my wrist from a period of time where I was doing 12-hour days drawing, and it's just probably never going to go away. I wish I'd been more diligent about my movement. That's why I'm starting with that one. Definitely build the habits now because they're much harder to break once they're built in. Because the thing is, once you get more into active art creation, you start getting into these flow states, and then when you get into these states, you start neglecting awareness of your body because you're just so into like, you really used to like putting on the lines and eyes and hair that you kind of start to forget your actual physicality, and then you start building these habits of tension that you're not even aware of that just destroy your little tiny joints, right? So I highly encourage you build those habits as soon as possible, right? As far as lines are concerned, this is just getting comfortable with making like the basics of art, which is just lines, right? If you don't feel comfortable doing a straight line, why are you trying to draw advanced anime? You're just gonna be fighting yourself the entire time, right? That's why it's really important to start here, because if you can't make like a confident, if you can't like get a circle, and this is how you see a lot of artists draw circles, erase it out. Oop. Right? If you don't feel comfortable like doing this sort of loose circle and like drawing these little areas, like if this is something you have to fight with, like it's just going to make doing more advanced art all the more painful because you don't have that underlying confidence. It's like, why are you trying to shoot, maybe like a sports reference, why are you like trying to shoot 3-pointer basketballs if you can't just get the ball in the net from right underneath it, It's kind of like, you want to sort of like learn within your ability and be realistic that this is not a quick thing. There are people that spend their entire life trying to master art, and they never will because art is really complicated. Like, there's things I still am not a master of within art, even though I'd say I'm pretty good. But, there's some times when my paintings just aren't where I want them to be. There's times when my color's not where I want it to be. There's sometimes landscapes I might have a little more time I have to think about. Right? But like when I'm doing anatomy and characters, I don't think anymore. So just be very aware that this is a lifelong investment if you want to get really good at this stuff. So just my biggest piece of advice, if you want to improve at art, is learn at the level you're at and be very aware that this is not something you're going to do quickly. Very, very few people improve at art quickly. And that's because what happens is you get this sort of feedback loop where like you draw at your level, right? That's phase one. And what happens is, eventually what happens is you're going to see mistakes. I should probably do this in 3, pardon. Right, and you're going to see mistakes. And what happens when you start seeing mistakes is you're going to not know how to fix them. You just won't understand how to fix them, but you'll see them. And a lot of times we get to this stage and we're discouraged. Like, oh, okay, I can't do this. But this is actually a good thing. When you're seeing the mistakes, it means your eyes are improving, right? Because you can spot something now. And so what do? Instead of getting discouraged, you go to the next part, you figure out why it's wrong. Okay? Don't get discouraged. You figure out why it's a mistake. Okay, that's the next step. And then you try to apply this. I really should have 4 here, so let me get rid of this. So we're building out our little diagram of how I think you should improve at art. Right? And you want to try to correct the mistakes and apply the knowledge. Knowledge starts with a K to new art. Right? And then you kind of draw your level. And over time, these mistakes will get fixed, and you're going to integrate the new knowledge, and you draw your level. And you just keep kind of doing this rotation, and this is how you really improve. Right? That's the general flow of it. So wherever you are within this roadmap, whatever it may be, wherever you feel like you're at your level, you just follow this rotation, right? If you're having a hard time with perspective, well, try and draw something in perspective. Try and spot the mistakes. The ones you can spot, figure out why that's a mistake. And you can do drills, you can draw new pieces. Just try and figure out what you did wrong and then integrate it into new pieces. And then accept, that Satsu's going to hit the wrong button at some point. And then also accept this takes time. Everyone learns at their own pace, okay? Just because someone figured out how to draw twice as fast as you doesn't mean anything. You're not them, they're not you. Accept that you're going to learn this at your own pace. Have faith you will learn it, and it's going to happen, okay? That's I see so many young artists just beating themselves up because they see somebody already at the level they want to be at, or someone's learning twice as fast, and they think like somehow they're less than as artists. It's not how this works, okay? Don't do that to yourself. All you're doing is undermining all of your growth by buying into that narrative, okay? Any questions so far before I keep rambling? Does that all make sense? Yeah, a really, really big part of this is don't beat yourself up and let yourself learn at your own pace. Which I'm going to just tie into this point here. I want to make sure I say this the right way. Art is a really strange thing to learn, like relative to other skills. Because when you create art, it's really hard not to involve your ego because you're creating it from yourself, right? This is a creative process. When you back to like the basketball thing. I don't actually play basketball, but back to the basketball thing. When you play basketball, you're just kind of throwing a ball around, right? You're not like putting a piece of yourself into how you throw the ball or how you put on your sneakers or how you run around the court. It's like lacking that intrinsic personal element. But when you take things in your head and you communicate them to a page, it's really hard not to see little pieces of yourself in your work because that's just how the process works, right? So it's really common that when you dislike your work, you're actually just disliking yourself in some way, which is really demotivating, right? Because you put your art out, and especially when you go online, like you put your art online and it gets no likes, people say it sucks, whatever it may be. It's really, really hard, if you're not aware of this, to not take it really personally, because art is such a personal thing. And so you have to learn to give yourself time, learn at your pace, look for small wins, but also to remove your ego from the process as much as you can, right? Because that thing is vicious. I'll make a little list for that. That's probably a good list, right? So we have the, and then also, here, let's see. You want to remove your ego, right? Got to remove your ego because it takes a lot of attempts to improve, and it's going to be very hard not to be critical of all those attempts. You got to remove your ego, right? Be patient with how you learn. I don't know why I did the short version. With how you learn. How you learn. To be patient with how I write. Learn at your level. Don't try and do, like, you can play with it, right? Sometimes there's a lot to be gained from trying to do something outside your wheelhouse or outside your skill. But when you're outside that level, be aware that you're outside that level and remove your ego. So if you decide to go and try and do something advanced and you do a horrible job, be realistic. Like, of course I didn't do very good. I don't know much about this. But you probably learned something during that attempt, right? That's why it's really, really important to remove your ego from this process. Because this is, honestly, this is probably the biggest one that screws artists. Is artists are naturally very egotistical because there's so much of ourselves in our art. And that just makes it really hard to learn. Like if you're going to go out and learn how to play basketball, right? Or you're going to learn just how to like ride a bicycle. If you fall off the bicycle, you don't like think I'm a bad person and I make dumb things. No, you're like, I fell off the bicycle. You get on the bike and you try again. Because like, it's a bicycle, whatever. You have to have that same mentality when you learn art. And then, you know, these YouTube videos about like how to improve an art don't really matter as much because you're much more aware of the real thing that's holding back your progress is your idea around your art and its value relative to yourself. Because that's the real thing that I see messing up young artists, is they're scared to put their stuff out there. I see people that are scared to just draw things because they expect it's going to suck and they don't want to experience that failure when they create. And so they won't make anything. And of course, if you don't make anything, you don't build that relationship between your muscle memory and your hands and your eyes and your brain and your knowledge to ever improve. And so this is the sneaky, pardon my French, fucker that's really what you got to watch for. This is the artist destroyer. This is honestly, the rest of this is just, you need to attack this viciously. You get rid of this, improving an art is easy. Because then you just treat it like getting better at anything else. Right? Okay, so ego's the big one. Learning at your level, being patient with how you learn. I'm going to put down another one here. Just ignore the noise of other artists. Do the best you can, right? And then another one, you need to practice a lot, right? Practice frequently. Got to practice frequently in small amounts is usually best. This one's backed up by neuroscience, so you know it's true. I always recommend doing like a 10-minute sketch at the beginning of the day. Like, you know, while you're doing your breakfast, just do a pose sketch. Like you just have a pose and you're like, okay, here's a head, here's a rib cage, here's a hip, okay, here's some eyes. Arms coming out, right? Just like literally sketch out a pose and you'll get faster and faster. Give yourself a little timer, 10 minutes. I'm a big fan of this one. Whatever you need to work on. Maybe you're doing some value stuff, so sketch in. You know, okay, we're doing values. Oop. Right, little circle here. Maybe we'll do like a little boop, boop, boop. Okay. Why isn't that drawing? I don't know. Oh, I gotta clip it. Whoops. Right. Why aren't you drawing on that? It's not making marks on my object. Okay, well, I don't know why Photoshop's doing that. That's outside of my understanding. Being a butthead. Guys, Photoshop's being a butthead. I gotta really get to Clip Studio, like, seriously. Seriously, I gotta get to Clip Studio. Anyways, right? Okay, here. There we go. Right. Pull out your tablet or whatever you got. Do a little value study here. Right? Just knock it out. Whatever. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I gotta switch. Anyways, right? Practice frequently in small amounts. That's the winner, right? And with all of these, I think you're gonna do okay. As far as going between them, because that's a big thing, moving between the levels, that just comes with chaining your understanding. So let me just get rid of this again, back to the roadmap. Yeah, Photoshop has really gone downhill. I agree with you, like 100%. It's kind of laggy too, honestly. So just going over the roadmap real quick and how you chain these. So you start with your lines, right? Straight lines, curved lines, circular lines, putting your lines together, right? Just doing all these weird shapes, chaining things, just getting comfy with drawing with your wrists, with your elbow, with your shoulder, right? Here's your lines. Okay, so this is like level 1, right? We want to go to level 2, which is, or is level 1, and we want to go to level 2, which is shapes. Well, shapes are just made of these lines, right? So if I want to draw a cube, straight lines, straight lines, straight lines, each put together. Okay, what if I want to make a weird cube? Okay, let's get rid of this. We want to do something a little bigger, and then you just work on your forms, right? This is all just lines. Now you're just learning to put these lines into shapes, right? Okay, put a triangle up here. You see how these like chain together really cleanly, right? Whereas if I were to try and jump into doing proper values on this, I probably don't have the framework mentally to really make the move to the next step. That's why it's important to move in this sort of fashion, because then it gives you a foundation for every step, right? Like my prior point, a lot of times I suspect someone's jumping into like composition when they don't understand form. Well, then of course your composition is going to suck. You don't know what you're doing. That's just kind of the brutal truth of it, right? And it's okay if it turns out if it doesn't turn out great, because again, if your ego's out of the process, you'll probably learn something, right? Does that all making sense so far? You feeling something useful coming out of this? We getting something? Good. Right? You know, from shapes, I've actually jumped into form already. I'm sorry, this is actually level 3. I went to level 3. This is form. Form is 3D form. Oh my god. Right? This is form. Level 2 is making shapes. Make sure it's all nice and labeled. This is shapes, which would be like drawing this thing from the side. Right? Putting your lines together and making shapes. I'll even break these up. Right? So like there, lines, 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 lines. Just getting good at making lines. Building that confidence with creating swoops and stuff like that, right? And you just keep chaining it. That's how you really make fast progress. Because every time you do one of these levels, you understand the piece before really well. Like, it's much easier to learn depth when you can make these shapes before with confidence, right? If I move to depth, if I want to put this in perspective, right? Do my little perspective line. Boop, 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 boop. Right, see that? Suddenly I can now draw this stupid shape in perspective, because I don't have to fight my lines, I don't have to fight my form, I can just focus on learning perspective. right? This little graphic help make sense of how you make sense of all this nonsense? Oh, hi, Luna. I didn't see you there. Or Lunae. Depth. And then you just keep going, etc., right? And then you start adding your values to it. Then you start learning about color because color is more advanced than values, and it's really important about that. And once you, like, right here, actually, I would say here, honestly, 1 to 6. Once you have 1 to 6, you have a lot of room to just learn art, right? Composition and texture aren't like super critical to doing your art. That's more specialized. So I really shouldn't have done 1 to 8. They should have been 1 to 6 is your fundamentals, and then 7 to 8 are just kind of specialized fundamentals. They're important, but they're more specialized. And then 9 to 10 is where you or 9 to 11 is where you're really kind of into things. And I should mention here at the end of your roadmap, right? You'll notice there's figures, portrait, and landscape. Most artists will hyperfixate on one of these three. You can even argue it's just characters or landscape because portraiture and figures are kind of the same thing, but not really. Like, I'm much stronger at figures than portraiture, right? Because the human face is, because we're humans and we prioritize the human face, we put a lot of emphasis on it. So there's just this whole world where you can just go into learning human faces because we're egotistical. Watch out for that. But before you ever start diving into these specializations, you got to understand your basics. And I think that's really the gist of how I would suggest you improve at art. Any questions? Was that helpful? Do you feel confident about getting better at art now? Well, I have a sip of water. Let me know. Any thoughts, any questions? Don't be shy. Otherwise, I think that's our talk. I'll take that as we have complete understanding. So let's dive into Q&A.